Hey, Dad.
Hi, how you doing this evening? Hey,
Pretty
I heard
good.
today that the governor of Texas has removed all mask mandates. No masks anymore in Texas, except for
Yes,
except for the bandits when they rob the banks. I guess they can still wear masks, I think, but
I thought
7-Eleven.
this mask thing was kind of a done deal, but it seems like it's re-erupted into a controversial thing again.
Has it? Well, yeah, I know. I mean, in Kerrville here, you see a few people wearing them, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But San Antonio is a different situation. So, yeah, what do you think about that? You gonna wear your mask?
Well, I mean, from the beginning, I've always thought, you remember when we went rafting in the Grand Canyon and that guide, he pulled us all together and he
Uh,
said, he said, listen to me, look at me, look at me. You must become an active participant in your own survival.
yeah,
That
I'm
really
the
stood out to
guide, but
yeah, that really
yeah,
stood out to me because he was like, "I'm gonna do my best to keep you alive, but at some point, you've got to take responsibility for yourself." And I've
yeah.
kind of felt that way about the whole, through the whole pandemic. I'm kind of like, well, just like, what's that? Yogi Berra said, "If people don't want to come to the ballpark, who's going to stop them?" I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, if people don't want to not wear a mask at the bar, who's going to stop them? Wait, is that it? If people don't want to not wear, I don't
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
so, but the challenge I always face is obviously the question like, what is as Christians, what's our responsibility? And there's those
Right.
pesky verses in the Bible about bear one another's burdens,
Yeah.
take care of the weaker brother. Those who are vulnerable, we're
Yeah.
supposed to care for them. So I'm like,
Yeah.
as much as I want to exert my rights, it's tricky. I mean, I guess what do you think Jesus would do on this one? Would Jesus remove the mask mandate?
Boy, I always get nervous with those "What would Jesus do?" questions, because he was always pulling it over on his disciples. They never knew what he was going to do. In fact, I think many of them were surprised right up to the end when that ascension thing. They're out there and all of a sudden he starts rising, and it's like, is is that what they expected him to do? I kind of doubt it. So yeah, you do have. Well, of course, you have the obey the government. That Romans 13 thing, but when the government's not saying do that, so
Yeah, so
I
so some people would say the government is being irresponsible now by doing
yeah.
this.
Yeah, so again, I think you address it from that question of caring for a weaker brother because it is, that's a pretty heavy duty one in 1 Corinthians 8 because it says that Paul's talking about eating meat offered to idols, which was a big deal back then, and these people who had been idol worshippers, it was a big deal, but it wasn't a big deal to him, and so he said, I can do it, but it was interesting because what he said, and this, he said, um, if your freedom encourages someone else to do something that is contrary to their conscience, the weaker brother, he's saying you may be the more spiritually mature,
All
but if
right.
your freedom is causing them to be tempted to sin, then you're sinning yourself. You're doing what's wrong. And so he said, I wouldn't even eat meat. So yeah, you get you like when you're walking with your child, a dad walking with a child doesn't expect the kid to keep up. He slows down. And
Mhm.
so the more spiritually mature person always needs to demonstrate that maturity by slowing down and allowing the slower ones, the weaker conscienced ones to catch up, even though Paul said, I don't have a problem with it.
Which is where I kind of come on down on this. Whenever you're asking what would Jesus do? Well, first of all, probably
Yeah.
Jesus would just heal everybody.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we don't have that luxury, right?
Yeah.
So where Paul talks about we're kind of stumbling around in the fog here, looking through a glass darkly. Um, it's almost like it's not even it's kind of a dumb question. What would
Yeah.
Jesus do?
Kind of.
Because it's not an apples to apples thing. Because you're talking about, well, first of all, was it Tony Evans that said Jesus didn't come to take sides, he came to take over?
Take over. Yeah.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
so he set up this whole other kingdom, but it gets tricky because we're maybe for the first time in world history, like we're in this unique country that has this freedom that
Yeah.
we take it for granted, but the ability to just speak out, say whatever you want has been that's never
Never
been
been
in the
there.
history.
Yeah.
And the king ruled by divine right, and the people didn't have any say. And now we've taken it for granted so much, and we question left and right the decisions of our leaders. Where you question the decision of your king, I'll just chop off your head.
Yeah.
So
I think
it
we're actually going back to that, and they had in Europe, they had the castles and the royal guards and all that. And now we kind of have our castles in Washington and the
yeah,
royal
the
guards.
castle, the Washington Castle, yeah.
Yeah. So we may be going back to that. So yeah.
So I guess I'm guessing we've got 5 minutes to conclude this
Answer the
very
question.
complex
Okay.
thing. We have five
Here's what
minutes.
Jesus would do. I sincerely believe If someone said, "Should we wear a mask?" He would say, "Show me a mask. You who are without sin, wear the first one."
What?
Don't you think so? Or whose image is on that? No, well, those are other questions, weren't they? Okay, so that doesn't help any?
Yeah.
You don't think so? Okay.
I
Well,
guess
that's my best.
here's what I think he would do. Whatever he
Okay.
did, it would be tempered with love, which is basically the only
Yeah.
option we've got.
Yeah.
Which is where Jesus asks us to do really hard stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't
Well,
like
the problem
that.
you
I'd
the
rather the
problem
easy
you get
path.
in
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
you get into with, okay, my weaker brother. At what point do you draw the line with that? Because, like, I've been in ministerial alliances where the vice president was a member of the Unity Church. So the ministerial alliance, they always do this. They always have to go to the lowest common denominator. So in that case,
What
they
does the
couldn't
Unity Church mean even for the people?
they're, God's everywhere, God's nowhere, God's in the trees, God's in the clouds. It's
Okay,
definitely
okay,
not salvation by Jesus. So therefore,
okay,
they couldn't even get together to do a evangelistic campaign for the city or anything because
right.
everybody had to agree upon it. And so or for example, do we find the common denominator? Okay, the lowest common denominator, do we all dress like the Pentecostal holiness people who feel a scriptural conviction to where the women don't cut their hair, the women wear long clothes? I was in school with a guy who was an independent Baptist. We're
Right.
out in 95-degree temperature in Corpus Christi, Texas, 120-degree humidity, and he's playing tennis in long pants and long shirt because that's what they wear. He can't wear short sleeve shirts even. So do we all go to the lowest common denominator?
Which I think that's an important distinction here. First of all, this conversation we're having is for those who consider themselves followers of Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're not a follower of Christ, you got to figure out what your standard is on your own, right?
Yeah.
But as followers of Christ, we unfortunately, I guess we should be grateful for it. We have these standards that are higher call, and it really it stinks sometimes because you have to live up to this. Yeah, I have a right to this, but everything is permissible to me, Paul says, but not everything is profitable. And if in the long run you're ending up hurting someone, maybe it's not the best thing. So now that the mask mandate is removed, I think the question we've got to ask ourselves as Christians is, regardless of whether you agree with what the governor of Texas did. If you're not in Texas, sorry.
You know what you really are sorry.
You know what you got to do. But for us now, the question as Christian is, now that you've got this freedom, which is interesting, it's kind of parallel to once you've got your freedom in Christ, it's the same thing. Everything is permissible, but what are you going to do with that? Are you going to be wise? Are you going to be sensitive? Are you going to be caring of others? Or what are you going to do? And that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah. The other thing is, anytime as Christians we're focusing on our rights, we're focusing on the wrong thing. We're been crucified with Christ. How many rights does a dead man have? We're supposed to be dead, and Christ.
A right to remain silent.
That's true, and you can use it too. Ding. So when we focus on our rights instead of focusing on our responsibilities, we focused in the wrong direction. Because again, the idea of a Christian life is not Jesus come into my life and make my life better. The idea is my life is over. I've been crucified with Christ. Now he lives his life through me.
Right. And which is where the question, what would Jesus do, come from?
What would Jesus do? Yeah.
And we're back to ground zero.
Yeah. Well, we do know this. We do know he would do what the loving thing is. And if someone had and I think that's what most Christians are doing. If someone is concerned about it, I'll slap the mask on if it makes them happy.
Wear the mask.
If someone's got the freedom to do it, because I don't think it's going to cause them to sin if they see me in a store without a mask on, But if they're uncomfortable about it, then out of love, out of compassion, out of care for and concern for them, wear the stinking mask. What difference does it make, And if you see somebody, if you feel a real conviction about wearing a mask and you see somebody who's not, just cut them some slack, just you give them the same grace you want them to give you. And if we'll just be gracious with one another, we probably won't go too far wrong from what Jesus would do.
I agree. Now, you can direct all your Christian hate mail to Rick Malm no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just put it right there in those comments below.
It's the Christian hate mail. They're like, I completely disagree with you, brother.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. And I love what Paul said. He said, if any man has a different opinion, God's able to show him also.
Yeah, right. He'll show you what I've already been revealed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't think we've solved anything here, but I do hope that we have maybe brought to light some other points of view and remember and really bring some, hopefully, just chill out, everybody. Dad, you always say that God is light, so lighten up.
Lighten up.
That's hippie line.
Yes. Okay.
Hey, if you've enjoyed this conversation, we didn't really tie a bow on anything, but if you've enjoyed the conversation, you can check us out. We've got our full length podcast every Thursday. A new one drops. You can check that out at joelmalm.com, joelmalm.com/podcast. I think I've got a thing to promote that. Yes. And, or you can check out joelmalm.com, rickmalm.com, and subscribe to the podcast. Thanks for listening. Hey, if you got any questions that you'd like us to talk about on Tuesday, shoot me or Dad a message. We'd love to talk about it. We're always kind of like, what should we talk about? So, hey, have a great week and enjoy your mask freedom, or don't.
Yes.